First and foremost, guys, I just want to mention that we are giving away a Tacticam November 15th. That is the cutoff. Like, comment, subscribe. That's all you got to do. You're entered in that giveaway. Number two, it is booking season. It is the time of the year in which we start booking up a lot of clients all over the country. Last year I was everywhere from Kansas to New Hampshire and pretty much everywhere in between. So if that is something that you guys have interest in, having us come out to your property, writing a comprehensive report so that you can pull deer off your neighbor's property, know where to put your trail cameras, tree stands, make money on your property, all these different things. Write a timber stand improvement report plan, how to plant food plots, when to plant, what to plant, all the goodies. Make sure you go to our Facebook and shoot us a message, or email me at whitetaillandmanagement@gmail.com. Let's get into the video. How to call in rutting bucks. There's a couple different ways we can go with this video, guys, but there's a scenario that I want to talk about that actually cameraman Nick and I were talking about. He's talking about this buck. He was hunting in the past, and this buck was receptive to calling, but only during certain times of the year or during certain scenarios. So obviously we know the pre-rut and even the prime rut and maybe even post-rut are times of the year in which we can get away with calling. And why does that work? It works because generally they're seeking a mate. Bucks are seeking a mate or seeking some action. The end goal is always to breed a doe, and if they know that there's another buck maybe around or a doe or whatever, at least there's another deer there. Maybe that introduces them to a situation in which they could breed. And so cameraman Nick is telling me about this scenario where he had this buck locked down with a doe. And he pretty much threw the book at this deer, and there was nothing he could do to pull this buck off of that doe. And so in that scenario, I think what Nick ended up learning at the end of the day is during those scenarios when you have a doe and a buck, and that buck is locked down with that doe, I think it's okay to try some calling. Maybe you try a light grunt, maybe you tickle the antlers, maybe you do a snort wheeze, but don't overdo it and don't keep beating it to death, because ultimately what you're going to do is you're going to educate that deer, and there's really no opportunity, or there's really no reason for that deer or that buck to leave those does, because he's at the apex of what he wants. He has that doe. So unless you're truly threatening him, maybe with like a decoy in a perfect scenario, maybe you can pull him off for a second so he comes and fights you, and so you don't take his doe. It'd be a very hard scenario to pull that deer off of that doe. So I think you gotta give him a little something, and maybe he comes in just because maybe it's the one chance you get. But otherwise, if you know that this deer is a homebody, which he's probably going to be for the next 48, 36 hours because he's with this doe, you need to be waiting for when he separates and breeds that doe and then leaves her, because that is a time in which he's ready for round 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, whatever. He's ready to breed another doe. So now when he hears those antlers crack, he's going to think, oh, that's two bucks fighting over a doe. Or he hears that grunt, maybe that tending grunt that a buck lets out sometimes, that long, just drawn out grunt. He's going to say, oh, that buck's with a doe. I need to go steal that doe. Maybe it's a doe bleat that time of the year, where, hey, that's a doe. That's a time in which that will trigger that deer's sense of curiosity, and he will come into those calls. Now, one thing I want you to remember when you make these calls is don't do it in plain sight. I can think of a scenario last year of a buck that we were hunting called Dumbass, and we named him Dumbass because he would just run around like a chicken with his head cut off. But the first time I figured out what we we're going to name this buck ultimately is this scenario where he was paralleling me, and he kind of went past me and dropped down into this bottom system, this lower topographical system. And as soon as he went up and over that ridge, what did I do? Crack the antlers together, and I let him rattle for probably 10-15 seconds, and I couldn't see him, but I could picture him stopping and whipping that head around. And sure as hell, guys, he came in running to the base of my tree, and I was sitting there on a bean pole with no cover like this, maybe 9 feet off the ground, and he came to the base of my tree. Now, why did he come to the base of my tree? Because he was curious and he was seeking a breeding partner. Now, if he would have been with a doe, that's probably not working. So there are times of the year in which this stuff can work. You know, let's call it October 20th would be the earlier side of it, depending where you are, all the way to November 20th. But keep these scenarios in mind when calling. Realize that you don't want to beat it to death when you don't think that deer is actually going to come in. Yeah, you got to throw the Hail Mary at him once or twice, but don't just keep blap, 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 blap on the grunt call if he's not coming. Stop. because he's in the area, and if you come back tomorrow, he might not be with that doe, and one of those calls might work where you might have blown him off that first day, blown him out of the area, and he's probably not coming back because you just overdid it. So at the end of the day, guys, pay attention to how you're calling. Make sure that these deer can't see you when you are calling, and just time it. Time it up with the time in which these deer are seeking and looking for that breeding partner. And if you can do that, guys, I bet you kill him. I bet you kill that big mature buck.
I did kill him.
By the way, Nick killed him, so mic drop.